All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's holiday webinar. Thank you so much for joining. For those who are joining, please put your name, where you're joining from, as well as your product or business in the chat. Hello, Juliana and Maxwell. How's it going?
We're doing great.
Good.
Thank
Happy
you for having us.
Wednesday. Yeah, happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. We're
Yeah,
excited.
we're excited to be here. Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to wait just a few more seconds for more folks to join. So in the meantime, I would love, before we kind of kick this off into your presentation, can you guys share a little bit about Saltbox and what it is you guys do?
Sure. Jules, you want to cover it or you want me to?
Maxwell, you're a co-founder. You can go ahead.
All right. I'll take the privilege. So hey, everybody. I'm Maxwell Bonney, one of the co-founders of Saltbox. And really, we built this business because we knew that e-commerce operations are just, really hard and inaccessible, especially for growing businesses. You think about a growing business from just getting started to all the way to hitting your, first $10 million in sales. And along the way, you need to be able to store, ship, and manage your operations. And that's really hard at any size, but especially hard for small businesses. And so we said, why is it hard? Well, you need flexibility, you need access to enterprise level tools and services, and then you need sort of to be able to buy things in increments that fit your business. So we started Softbox to solve that problem. So we have flexible workspace, logistics services, and then shipping technology, the three key components we feel are necessary to support a business while you're growing, to ensure that you can, ship on time, especially during peak season, but also spend more time focusing on growing your business and less time worrying about the operations.
Amazing. And I know, how many locations do you guys have at the moment?
Yeah, we have 12 locations in 9 cities across the U.S., everywhere
Amazing.
from Seattle to Miami.
Awesome. I love this. Always be shipping. Who came up with that?
Oh man, someone smarter than myself.
No, it's great. It's great. Well, I'm so excited for your presentation. I think sometimes shipping is almost like forgotten and how important it is, for e-commerce brands during the holiday season, because there is so much that goes into it and there's so many things that you should know and look out for. So I can't wait to hear what you guys have to share. So for those who are joining, again, please put your name, where you're joining from, as well as your product or brand in the chat. And if you have any questions during the presentation, you can add it in the chat and we will save them for the end. All right, so with that, I'll let you guys take it away.
All right, go for it, Jules. Let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Juliana. I am the senior lead of marketing and growth at Saltbox. So I essentially cover everything under our brand portfolio, campaign management, content marketing, social media marketing, all of that fun stuff. I was previously in sales in the shipping and fulfillment world. So I've worked with a lot of e-commerce brands and helping them get set up with their shipping and fulfillment process. So I know a lot of the ins and outs myself. And I look at shipping in a completely different way now as a consumer. But I have a lot of tips and tricks that I've learned along the way just from working with large e-com brands. So hopefully all this content will be super helpful for everyone who's joining. Maxwell, I know you said you're a co-founder, but do you want to give any background on yourself?
Sure. Yeah, we started this business almost 6 years ago, January 2019, and it came out of pain. So my co-founders and I, we've all built e-commerce and physical goods brands, and we all turned our homes into storage units and did a lot of scrappy, unscalable things to try to manage the physical operations of our business. And when we decided to solve this problem, we said there has to be a better way. We actually looked for a company that already solved the problem in a way we thought actually needed to be solved, right? In a flexible, accessible, and very approachable manner. And there was no companies that actually did it. So we said, let's do it ourselves. Let's solve this problem. And our real motivation, right, is to make it easier for growing brands to actually grow, right? And not have your operations get in the way of your growth and not have, and sort of increase working capital in your business, right? So the flexible and accessible way of buying Saltbox allows you to manage your working capital in a certain way, which was a big pain point for myself and my co-founders. So we took that motivation and used that to start Saltbox, and it's been a fun ride for the past 5.5 years.
Happy to be along for it. All right, I'll kick us off here. Maxwell, did you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah. So, a big part of why we started Saltbox, right, is to support brands. One of the key ways to that we can support you is to actually like provide education about how to manage your operations. So in this, right, going into peak season, we're going to cover, okay, what does peak season actually mean, right? And then what is unique about this year, and then how can we give you some guidance to sort of be successful during this period? And so we want you to feel informed, right, to start, like understand what's actually happening, and then be prepared to take that information and do something with it. And then hopefully you're inspired to go ahead and like actually implement some steps, some things that you can do like sort of right after this, right after reading this and watching this, and or things that you can implement over the coming months to get prepared for peak season. Yeah. So when we think about planning, people are always like, "Oh, is it worth planning?" I'm a big fan of this quote from Eisenhower. This is during World War II, and it sounds counterintuitive, but it's so true. Right? Plans are nothing, but planning is everything. Really, what that means is nothing goes according to plan. But if you do not plan, you do not know how to respond. And that to me, that's a very, very helpful mindset going into peak season, going into any sort of operations, but especially peak. Right? Is like set a plan, and then once you have that, as things change and as things evolve, you'll be better prepared to actually respond and hopefully lead yourself to success. But you don't have to take General Eisenhower's word for it. We have a really cool chat from one of our members. This is Bree Fulton. She founded Shinery in 2020, moved into Saltbox right when she founded the company, and she said something to me that was so inspiring. Right, you can read the full quote, but this last part is so key. That during peak season, everything, including your mistakes and inefficiencies, get amplified, and that sat so deeply with me because what I realized is, right, if we have the ability with being co-located and supporting so many e-commerce brands to sort of like remove that, right, to help you be as prepared as possible for peak season. So that's how I want you guys to feel at the end of this, right, is to not have peak crush you, but have peak be as exciting and as beneficial to your brand as possible. Cool. So what's happening this year during peak season? So everybody knows, hey, peak, high volume, right? For lots of people, like, everybody's getting ready to support their family and friends with gifts or do something really special for themselves. But if you think about it on the back end, all that sort of buying, that those packages have to start from someplace and then travel and then get to that end customer. And this year, what's interesting is peak season's compressed, right? So there are 17 days between Black Friday and Christmas this year, which is the shortest it's been in a very, very long time, right? A late Black Friday in terms of late Thanksgiving, and then Christmas is always Christmas. So there's 17 operations days between that. So what's actually then what that leads to, in addition, right, is there are going to be potentially delivery timelines just because of that impacts compacted season. People are going to buy the same or more than they did last year. There's going to be less days to manage that physical activity. And so one of the key things here is like make sure that you just are generally aware, be prepared for potential operational strain. That's both on you and your teams for managing the pick and pack process and shipping things out, but also for the carriers, right? They're the ones who are going to pick up the products, take them to sort centers and try to deliver them to the customer. And there's less days to do the same, if not more, operational activity and shipping of packages than there have been in recent history. So when you think about these compressed days, one thing to just know is like sort of you want to ensure that you are thinking about sending out products before the key dates, before the key cutoff dates, depending on the speed with which you want to ship a product. And that will ensure that it gets to your customer in time for the holidays. And so these are the main cutoff dates by shipping mechanism for the three major carriers. And what I would say here is you want to ensure that you can think about this in your marketing programs. You can think about this and we'll get to customer communication at the end here. But in terms of how you think about sort of encouraging people to buy and just informing them about when to buy to sort of hit their desired outcome, which is having the package in time to have underneath the tree if you have a tree, or have it underneath the fireplace if you decide to go without a tree. Right. So just having these dates are key. For lots of brands, if you ship yourself, yourself or have a small team, I would just print this out or something like this and just have it up and available, because it's key to know, okay, what are my options, right? If you're your brand, you're looking to go ground and you want to make sure your product gets there in time, especially during peak season, make sure you ship before, or at worst case, by that 14th, 15th of December. And if you miss that day and you choose to go ground, just know that the likelihood of your package getting there on time is very, very low.
And I like what a lot of brands have been doing recently, Maxwell, where they kind of work backwards. They know their fulfillment, how long it'll take for them to fulfill orders, and then they'll put messaging on their website that says, order by this date, you'll get it by Christmas or have it under the tree. I really like brands that have been communicating upfront about that, which I know we'll touch on a bit later too.
Exactly, right? And so there's ways now, this first section is about informing, and then we say what to do about it. But as Juliana mentioned, you can turn that information into ways to proactively engage with your customer and lead to faster, earlier, or even sort of like greater buying activity by leveraging this information, because everybody wants to ensure they get their packages on time. Cool. So in addition to the compressed season, anybody who's lived through peak before, carriers are really busy. They're increasing pricing. And so this key right here is just there's lots of information here. You can just read it yourself. We'll come back to take screenshots, come back and read here. But we're going to go through 3 slides here. For UPS and FedEx, right, they have both price increases during this period, but they are mainly focused on what you call sort of like additional handling surcharges, right? So there are the larger or heavier packages for these 2 carriers during these dates, right? Usually the end of September through the first couple weeks of January. There is increased pricing, increased cost for shipping heavy, large, oblong objects. And so the key thing here is having the information to be able then, if you haven't previously, forecast these changes, these pricing changes into your operational models. And the reason that's key is often for a lot of these, right, you're buying the postage upfront, if not pre-filling with your e-commerce shipping provider the amount of money necessary to ship. Right, and so if you don't forecast correctly, that's going to put a hamper on your working capital necessary to go ahead and meet the shipping deadlines. And so understanding, for your large bundles, if you're shipping pillows or couches or, long poles, whatever it is, understanding during this period of time, what the additional cost will be to ship, you can put that into your model and then better understand the working capital constraints on your product. So this is what UPS charges are. You can go to see at a high level what FedEx charges are. And then what's really interesting, if we go to the post office charges, so this is the first time, and I'm expecting this to happen every peak season, that the post office, as part of their 10-year plan to improve the economic efficiency of the post office, is cementing pretty significant increases to all aspects of shipping through the post office, right? Traditionally, post office has been a great, very affordable alternative to the 2 major carriers, but that has come at a cost historically, and they are starting to realize that cost and make major changes to sort of not to lose as much money as they have been. I think at its peak, the post office is losing somewhere around $1 million a day in terms of operating, which is unimaginable to think about. And so this change right here is going to impact all of us, right? Everyone who ships. And so I really want to call this out because oftentimes people expect changes from the from the UPS and FedEx, but there's going to be significant changes with the post office as well. So really add that to your forecasting for a shipping cost. And you can decide how you want to sort of handle that in terms of cost savings and operations and or price increases to absorb the cost. Or if you think you can make up that compression and margin with overall volume spend during the period of time. The next slide. So in addition to just the traditional peak increases in surcharges, there's a really big structural change that on this slide looks very simple. I wanted to simplify and not make it too nerdy. But essentially, I want to just explain this to you at a high level and then explain what you can do about it. So the post office is the best in the world at especially doing what we call last mile delivery, which they can get to every address anywhere in the United States, and they do that through very local, sort centers, right, where all the packages come in, they sort the packages, and then give them to the carriers who take it to every door in the United States. Traditionally, they've allowed big brands and people who aggregate demand of packages to inject parcels, small packages, into the closest distribution centers to big cities as possible. and they have made a drastic change to that process, and they're limiting which centers that these big brands and aggregators can inject packages. And what that is doing is that's doing two things. That is adding more, like we can call it upstream volume into the postal service, right? Where previously the volume was distributed to the smaller networks, now it's been aggregated and increasing into these big distribution centers. Well, what is actually happening is, as people see that change, a lot of them are moving away from leveraging the post office and moving that volume to UPS and FedEx, right? Great for UPS and FedEx. What that means, however, is that all of us who rely on UPS and FedEx, they now have much more volume than their previous inventory can handle in terms of infrastructure, trucks, humans, warehouses. And so they are taking on a lot more volume, especially from the largest shippers. And that's going to lead to, very clearly, and everybody's forecasting that, an overloaded network and shipping delays, right? It's just going to happen, right? Because the infrastructure moves slow, and this increase in volume with the same infrastructure is going to lead to just a slower output from these major carriers. And so I don't know if it's going to be 1%, 20%. It'll be different by brand and which region you're shipping out of. But across these major carriers, this peak season will have especially, you can forecast higher shipping delays and potentially higher error rates than you have experienced in the past. And that sounds like, okay, thanks for telling me that. What am I supposed to do about it? Yeah, good question. What are you supposed to do about it? We have 3 things that you can do about it, and Jules will walk us through especially what each of those 3 things are and how we can be helpful in terms of educating you about what to do.
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned before, I've worked with a lot of e-com brands, and peak season's always like a very stressful time. And these 3 tips that we're going to walk through are going to be able to help you just feel more prepared. Honestly, I think even just operationally being efficient, you want to be like mentally ready going into this peak season, be on top of your game. So hopefully these are all really helpful. The first one is to get your operations in order, essentially. So whether you're operating by yourself out of your home, maybe you just have a very small in-house team, or whether you're partnered with a 3PL, maybe you're in a co-warehousing solution similar to Saltbox. Any of these scenarios, all these steps will be really helpful in making sure that you're operationally ready going into peak season. And the 3 specific ones I'm going to walk through to get ready operationally are number 1, to forecast your shipping volumes. Number 2, invest in standard operating procedures. And number 3, optimize products and your packaging as well. So in terms of forecasting and estimating your shipping volume to the best of your ability, we strongly recommend doing this. I worked in the 3PL world before coming to Saltbox. And if you have a 3PL, this is probably the most important thing you could do, because your 3PL is going to be handling so many brands at the same time. And if they can anticipate your volume, there's a better chance that your orders are going to go out the door and have them prepared for what's coming as well. So in terms of where to start, the first thing to do is to understand how accurate your forecasting should actually be. So as a team or just yourself, decide whether it's a range or an exact volume that you're looking for that will help you plan for this. So if there's a level of error you can live with, then maybe that's something that you incorporate here. Maybe it's just a simple range that you're looking for so that you can staff appropriately, have all the packaging and supplies that you need on hand, but definitely plan for how accurate you actually want this number to be. And when you're starting out, we recommend, if when in doubt, we say zoom out. So essentially using a tops down approach as opposed to a bottoms up approach. So if you can start at the highest level of your product hierarchy and work your way down, maybe there's some products that you're more confident in or have more historical volume for, starting with those and then working your way down from that aggregate level down to a lower product SKU level. I worked with a lot of brands in the past that had new products that were really hard to forecast for, but if you've had some historical sales or historical marketing campaigns that worked well, you can use those to help inform this approach. So definitely consider any historical sales data you have. Maybe that's just pulling that from your Shopify store. I know some CRMs and some e-com platforms now have sort of AI tools to help with this. So if you have those available to you, that's extremely helpful, but you can also do this in a more manual way, even in like a Google spreadsheet. So using your historical data, any market trends in your industry. Shopify's always done a really good job of saying at Black Friday, Cyber Monday, what the highest selling industries were per year. Sometimes they'll say like a random product, like a basket was like the most sold product on a Black Friday, Cyber Monday. But you can look at any historical trends, market trends for your industry, for your product category, and that would be super helpful. And then the third one is obviously consider any marketing or sales promos you have, whether that's at the product level, a bundle level, a kit level. Make sure you're incorporating those into your forecasts as well. And then the second one is to invest in building detailed SOPs. So this is so crucial. Even at Saltbox, we have a lot of members that have us come and help them fulfill their orders in their warehouse suites. And we always ask for very detailed standard operating procedures for fulfillment, for returns, for kitting, any type of task that we're doing, so that we have a reference point, and we're doing everything to the best of our ability. But this will help you become efficient operationally. And one thing that's become kind of big in the fulfillment industry is obviously staffing. So if someone gets sick, for example, we want to make sure we have something to reference if we need someone else to step in, even if it's your own in-house team. I've worked with a lot of brands who had like friends and family helping them in their house before they were able to outsource fulfillment. So having these type of documents for any type of procedure that you have, shipping or fulfillment wise, will help you just be able to scale appropriately with volume. Maybe your sales will go even better than you planned. And this way, if you need extra help to come step in, you'll have documents ready for them to use and to pull from. We always recommend adding like photos and visuals to these, especially if you're working with a 3PL, because sometimes it can be hard for a warehouse associate who's anywhere across the country to kind of reference your products, what they look like, how you want things done. So anywhere you can add images or videos is always helpful. And then obviously, hopefully this will reduce errors that might happen on the fulfillment or shipping side, and hopefully get your orders out to customers faster and more efficiently as well. So there's a lot of cost and risk management associated with having these detailed SOPs, and they can sometimes feel like a lot of work. But I think as an e-com brand, if you're working with a partner, these will set you up for success more than anything else. And dimensional weight. This is a big one that is often overlooked, and I'm sure anyone who sells products that are on the light side but bigger dimensionally will already know about this. But I remember learning about this when I first started working in the shipping industry about 5 years ago, and I was like, what the heck is this? Like, why are things costing so much to ship if they're so light? And I learned that in 2015, all of the carriers implemented this, because previously they were only measuring physical weight, which obviously as e-commerce kind of had its boom, shipping trucks were filling up super quickly. Boxes were getting bigger and bigger, and they needed space in these trucks. And there wasn't a way to essentially measure the cost of filling a truck with only a few packages, if it's something super light but really big on the dimensional side. So dimensional weight is how the carriers account for the size of the package, and not just the actual physical weight when it's measured. So most 3PLs will know about this as well, but you can really lower your shipping cost if you account for dimensional weight earlier and think about how to package your products properly. So a really good way to do this is to either get custom sized packaging for your business if your products are a very unique or specific size. Getting custom packaging can help you eliminate any excess space, make sure your products fit pretty snug in there, as opposed to resorting to the packages that maybe your 3PL has that may not measurably add up to exactly what your products measure up to, adding extra dimensions to the box and the packages itself. And then also, if you're working with a 3PL or you're doing this from home, you can consider the actual materials that you're putting in the package itself. So if you're using dunnage to kind of fill space in a package, you can consider how much those weigh as well. Using lightweight materials like poly mailers when you can, or even envelopes for small non-fragile items can be really helpful. And then also just making sure things lay flat is really helpful for dimensional weight. But one thing I always tell people if they are working with a fulfillment partner is to ask what their dim factor is. So the one on this page here is 139. Some carriers, it's 166. Sometimes it varies whether you're shipping domestically or internationally. But if you're shipping anything, like if you imagine a pillow, I think like Maxwell gave an example of before, it's large, but it's super light. So the carriers and any 3PL will look at both the physical weight and the dimensional weight, and they'll choose amongst those two to create a billable weight, which is the higher of those two. So if you account for this early and you know about it, you can lower your shipping costs pretty drastically and build that into your forecasting. And then if you look at the materials as well, you can improve the sustainability of your products, choosing what you want to put in there, maybe using less packaging, and filling that space in the package better. So ultimately, I think customers get a better experience as well, because we've all had that moment where you open a box and you're like, this is the biggest box I've ever seen for the smallest product. What the heck happened? So you can account for that as well if you consider dimensional weight. And then the last one to consider is to definitely pre-kit. So leading up to peak season, if you have any bundles or kits that you're selling on your site that you know are going to be sold together, pre-kitting those can just enable you to fulfill a lot faster when those orders actually flow through. And inventory management wise, make sure things don't get lost. I know a lot of the times brands really worry about, there's 3 products in this bundle. Maybe you forget one and the customer, when they receive it, is missing a product. When you pre-kit those items ahead of time, that really reduces any errors that could happen. And if you're doing this pre-kitting ahead of time before your busiest season, you'll ensure that you have extra time to actually fulfill orders when they're going out, instead of worrying about kitting products that you probably could have done a bit beforehand. I've also worked with brands who will ask their manufacturer to do this. So it's kind of up to you. You can ask your manufacturer if you trust them to kind of pre-bundle things, or you can do it once your products arrive. Maybe you want to QA them before you actually kit them together, and do that on your end, or have your fulfillment center do it for you as a special project. So just a way to move a lot faster, essentially. And Maxwell, you're going to take us through the last few tips we have here.
No, thank you so much. So we talked a lot about what's happening both during peak season normally, but especially this peak season with FedEx, UPS, and the post office. And so, but there are alternatives. And the term for these alternatives are called emerging carriers, right? So these are newer, tech-forward, very creative carriers who are operating very similar to the post office, FedEx, and UPS, but they provide a better digital experience and with the same reliability. And so the three major ones that we trust and know very well, OnTrack, Pandion, and Viho, are basically have anywhere from 65 to 80% coverage in terms of getting to all the major places and major zip codes in the United States, with as fast, if not faster, delivery, and the same reliability in terms of error rate and sort of visibility in terms of tracking across the network. And what thinking about these emerging carriers does for you, it gives you an alternative in terms of hedging your risk for both the normal volume during peak season, but especially the potential delays with the major carriers. And so the way to access them for most of you is use your shipping and order management solution to have access to them, right? So if you may or may not have seen these names when you go to buy a label. You might be like, who are they? What is this thing? Right? Like you can hear from us, like these are trustworthy brands who are just newer. OnTrack is 20 years old. Pandion and Viho are less than 5 years old, but they were built by established industry veterans who saw a better way than what UPS, Post Office, and FedEx were doing, and so wanted to bring that better way to directly to consumers. And so the way to access them is through your order management solution. For instance, we at Saltbox, we recently built our own order management tool because we saw the growing impact of these emerging carriers. And we wanted to create a way for the smallest and fastest growing e-commerce brands to leverage their service delivery and their price savings. And so we built our own order management solution. It's called Parcel, to give access to any brand, whether they're in their house or they're hitting their first 10 million in sales, to be able to save anywhere from 50 cents to a few dollars per package which will add up a lot during peak season. But also what it does, it gives you an alternative. Again, the reason that these companies are a good hedge risk, they're not, none of them are doing any peak season surcharges. That's one. Two, they are operating with a different infrastructure than the major carriers. And so they are not dealing with the same peak season volume. And so that's two. Three, they have relationships both with each other and then through a variety of last mile delivery providers. And so they can distribute that inventory through a blended network as opposed to through their own individual trucks and planes. And so that allows them to be more flexible during peak seasons, especially by market. So definitely check out your order management solution. And if you don't have access to one, you can just send us a note. Any one of us, you can email us directly. I'm Maxwell at saltbox.com, or you can just check out the saltbox.com website and check out our new solution. And the goal there is just to give you access to more carriers to help you get through peak season. And the last tip here, I think sometimes this is forgotten about because when the bullets are flying, everyone gets nervous. But there's two sides to this marketplace, right? There's e-commerce brands who are shipping orders, and then there's the customer who's buying and receiving the product. And as things change, the number one thing we've seen in terms of both driving CLV and brand loyalty is being proactively communicating with your customers at all key steps of the buying process, both at the consideration phase, the conversion phase of the cart, and then the post-conversion phase after they've received the product, especially thinking about returns. Right, the phrase we like to use here is transparency builds trust. It can often be scary when things change to communicate it, but if for those of you who haven't gone through this process, you'll be surprised how refreshing it is for your customers to see a brand proactively communicating and letting them know what changes are coming and empowering them with options. And so there's 4 key steps that we see are helpful here in terms of that proactive communication to build transparency. The number one, right? If you're making any changes in your shipping, whether you're changing cutoff dates, whether you're adding new options, even if you're going to, sort of increase the price by 25, 50 cents to cover the shipping cost, proactively inform your customer so that you can manage expectations, but then they can make decisions themselves, right? Everybody's making changes during this period of time. You own that relationship with your customer. So if you proactively inform them about the changes, they can then respond accordingly, which is awesome. The next tier is consider adding, purchase by deadlines, somewhere prominently on your website. You know your buyer's digital behavior, whether they're in the browse phase, just during add to cart, or actually during the checkout experience, right? Sort of like adding purchase by deadlines there ensures that they know what to expect to ensure they get their product on time. And so it encourages timely orders. In addition, you all are running email and nurture campaigns, whether it's abandoned cart or it's, hey, you signed up for my newsletter and you're interested. And so use this medium to include reminders about alerts, about upcoming shipping timelines and changes, right? It's like oftentimes in those marketing emails, we want to talk about products and encourage the buy. Part of that buying experience is, am I going to get this on time? And when should I make a decision? And so taking the time during that marketing campaign is really, really important. It may seem counterintuitive, but trust us, again, transparency is key. And through all of these, know that you're being clear and concise is so important, right? All of your customers, myself included, right? We're busy and overwhelmed with messaging during peak season. We're busy at work. We're busy trying to figure out, what's on everybody's wish list. We're busy trying to figure out how to pay for it. We're running around in our cars. And so the clearer and and as concise as possible you can be in the communications here, this will enhance understanding of what you're trying to communicate and lead to greater satisfaction, right? It's very similar to the less error rates increases CX, right? So there's an error rate in communication, which is it wasn't clear and it was too long and I didn't understand it, right? If you can be clear and short enough to sort of maximize the time you have with them, it'll lead to increased satisfaction for your customer. That is go ahead, Jules.
Yeah, I was going to say, also just doing an audit of any of your policies that are currently on your e-com site. So obviously shipping policies, and then return policies. I find sometimes when I'm ordering from smaller brands, I'll go through their policies and I'm like, is this still applicable for peak season, for Christmas? Like, you want to make sure you update the language there, and parts of your site that you might have forgotten about, just to make sure it's all up to date. And when people are browsing and shopping, they have the most up to date information. And obviously, coming from the marketing side myself, even just a simple banner, if there's any delays for those purchase by dates, as Maxwell mentioned, those are always crucial and helpful as a consumer, making sure you kind of know everything you need to know up front before ordering and not having any surprises or bad experiences there. So
exactly.
Yeah, that was everything we had in terms of preparing for peak season. I know we left some time for any Q&A.
Yes. Oh my God. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Maxwell and Juliana. That was a great presentation. A lot of really helpful tips and tricks. I think one of the things that you had mentioned that I love is this idea of like when things get really stressful, like to kind of zoom out. And, one of the questions I have for you both is, when should brands start kind of pre-planning, right? I know, Juliana, you're talking about like the first tip, right, was to kind of start estimating shipping volume. Like, when should that be happening?
I think right now. That's this presentation was very timely because
and ideally, right? It might be a little late in it, but like ideally, when do you tell your customers to really start planning shipping volumes?
Yeah, I would say if you don't have a plan going into Q2, then you need to make sure you don't you don't start Q3. Sorry, coming out of Q2, you want to make sure you don't exit Q3 without a lot of clarity, right? And that sounds high level. So what I mean specifically, there are two big things that obviously go into affecting sort of how you can be successful during peak. One is how long does it take you to get products, right? Some people can manufacture and day of, like when an order happens. Others, it's anywhere from 60 to 90 days once an order is confirmed to get it from the manufacturer. So knowing that timeline is essential to then say, okay, how early do I need to plan, both for my inventory levels, for my pricing strategy, for my sort of bundling and kitting strategy, right? That's one. So that is the sort of known. The unknowns are going to be, do you have new products you want to experiment with? Or is there a trend you're trying to capitalize on? Or are there sort of laggards or things that like sort of either old season or SKUs trying to move that you want to be creative about and move during peak season? So you want to take those new variables and add them into your plan, right? And so sometimes that takes going into like getting out of Q2, going into Q3 to understand what might still be hanging around in terms of inventory or a new idea that I want to experiment with during Q4. And so I say, ideally, you want to exit Q2 with a plan, but at a minimum, you do not want to end Q3 without having a clarity about it.
Okay, great. No, that's perfect. And then I love too what you mentioned, Juliana, and I agree with this, right? Like I love when brands put on their website, the shipping timelines, right? Like buy now in order to get by Christmas. What do you recommend timing on that front? Like when should brands start putting those banners on their website?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it when we were showing the different carriers and their cutoff dates to get orders to consumers for Christmas time. I think as soon as you can start working back your timelines from those carrier cutoffs, building in your time to obviously fulfill orders, even having those fulfillment times on your website. I really appreciate when brands will say, you can expect your package to leave our warehouse or get shipped within 2 days, and then you can expect it to actually arrive another 5 days after that. I think sometimes as a consumer, you forget the actual fulfillment and the shipping kind of happen separately. There's the fulfilling of the package at the warehouse, and then there's getting it to the shipping carrier. And those are kind of two separate steps. Communicating both those deadlines or just working back and giving one kind of timeline to a consumer, I think is extremely helpful. But I think having that on your site, even in November before Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because as Maxwell mentioned, now there's only 17 operational days between Black Friday and Christmas. So it's kind of crunching that timeline a lot shorter for a lot of fulfillment centers, for a lot of people shipping themselves. So as soon as you can start communicating those, I would probably anytime in November timeframe when people are going to start thinking about the sale period before Christmas time.
That's great. Yeah, I know. And I know, Maxwell, you mentioned this too as well, like how important transparency is, right? To with your customers, like being really transparent with, hey, if you order this product, it's going to take X amount of days for fulfillment and then X amount of days for shipping. Like people want to know, right?
Yeah. They want to know. And I think one of the key things for everybody that's building a brand, your brand has a personality, your brand has like a connection to your buyer, and authenticity is so key. It's hard to get. And for the best brands, there's something authentic about your brand. And so how you communicate and sort of like keeping that authenticity reinforces that sort of brand promise and that connection with your customer. And so don't be afraid of that to like, in the shipping aspect. I know it's not sexy, but it's very, very vital and important.
Yep.
Yeah. One of my favorite brands, I'm Canadian, but one of my favorite brands out of Vancouver, she does everything herself fulfillment wise. I wish we had a Saltbox in Vancouver for her. Might coerce her into the Seattle one by chance, cross border. But
if you're watching,
she's just so transparent. She'll post like an Instagram story saying like, hey, I'm going on a week vacation. So any orders from my site, it's going to be delayed by a week fulfillment time. She'll put a banner up that just simply says like, I'm on vacation. And it's a very well-respected brand, but they do all the fulfillment in-house. And sometimes there's just like weeks or a few days where they take time off, and they just communicate that so upfront. And I as a consumer really appreciate that. And I find I'm like, it's all good. Like, don't worry about it as opposed to when I find out after that my order hasn't shipped for a week, I'm a little snarky, but
it's disappointing. I get that. Yeah. I mean, I think that,
you know what you're getting into.
Exactly. And the truth is, now with Amazon, I mean, we're all kind of expecting to get packages sometimes next day, same day, right? Which is wild to think about. So as transparent as you can be, the better.
Yeah, we're super spoiled.
Another question I had, I know you guys shared a lot of really fantastic tips, but what is the number one mistake you see brands make when it comes to shipping?
Oh, man. Over promising on free shipping and not thinking through the true cost, right? So,
yes.
That's a big thing, because to your point about expectations, right? Most of us have been trained to, things like I won't pay for shipping and it'll come in 2 days. Those two things, only Amazon can really do that and not really worry because of their scale. For most brands, you have to think about the overall cost to fulfill and ship that product and ensure that if you're promising something, you can actually afford it, right? Or you're okay subsidizing it for some period of time because you're trying to grow. But oftentimes they don't trust their customer in terms of like what they're willing to pay, or not clever enough in the pricing strategy to think about sort of what's the right bundle or minimum threshold to include free shipping, right? And so like it can be either daunting because it could be like a little bit of a math problem, or sort of scary because you're like, well, does my customer want to pay $3 more for shipping to include it? But like just thinking through that clearly enough so that you can actually make money once you ship the product is important.
Yes, we need to we're in the business to make money here. I know something too you mentioned, Juliana, was about custom packages and packaging. Are there any brands or custom packaging companies that you guys recommend to your customers?
You want to take that, Jules?
I mean, Uline is a classic one, but
yeah.
There's a lot of like up and coming startup companies as well that are kind of doing custom packaging for e-commerce. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Maxwell, you might be a bit more in the know on those.
But I mean, the answer is there's so many.
Yeah, that's the thing is I have like no idea. I'm like, are there, or are there just like one box? It's like one box.
There are so many, and I think I would say there's probably there's two big camps. I think there's camp, which is a growing camp, which is the green packaging, like green custom packaging, right? Because oftentimes those two things felt at odds, right? Can I customize it but still like be environmentally conscious in my packaging? And so there's a growing set of those companies who are either use recycled materials, use like fully biodegradable material, and still allow you to customize it. Use like ink and or stamping that sort of like do not do harm when they hit landfills, and or even have a way of you reusing the packaging as part of the lifetime value with your customer. So there's that bucket. Then there's the bucket of cheap and fast and I get a container from Canada. I mean, get a container from China, right? That's the other bucket, not Canada. Right? And then and I really think it's like what makes sense for your brand, right? Like that big, cheap, fast is very, very valuable if you want a green box with a simple 2-color logo. And I don't want this to look like an Amazon package when my customer gets it, right? And that's and it may be I have thinner margins and high volume. And so I'm trying to optimize to stand out without eating too much of my margin. And then the green sort of biodegradable, reusable packaging, right, needs to fit your brand, right? If your brand promise is net zero, if your brand promise is it's a B Corp, if your brand promises we're overall interested in circularity, it's very important to find a packaging company that meets that. And so those are the 2 buckets I would think through when choosing. But literally there are so many and they pop up all the time, right? If I said a name now, a year from now, that company could not be the really, really good one.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good advice. Okay, great. And then I just had one last question. And I know, Maxwell, on one of your slides, you had all of the dates with different shipping carriers and their cutoffs. I mean, is there one master place to see all these dates? Or, do you recommend brands go to those carriers' websites to find all this?
Good question. We're probably a couple weeks early where everybody's aggregating these. And then I'll say come October 1st, you're probably there's probably 20 places that'll have all this in one place.
Okay, right? So October 1st is the date, yes.
Yeah, come October 1st, every fulfillment brand, every distributor, they will all have this entire schedule. Ourselves included, right? We're going to have content that does that. So I would say anybody, saltbox.com, come October 1st, you will have go to our blog or sign up for our newsletter, and we'll have all this information easily available, turn into an easily digestible 1-pager, on a calendar format where you can just go ahead and look at it and say, great, those are my days. And then you can plug in, do I need 2 days to pick and pack? Do I need 3 days? And then have that work back plan for your buy deadline.
Amazing. Yeah, we will absolutely make sure we'll link that URL on this video as well. Cool. All right. Well, that's all the questions that I have. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for your time and everything that you do and sharing these tips and tricks around shipping and the holiday season. Definitely was a lot of really great stuff. So appreciate your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, everyone. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.